On behalf of the sponsors, Lloyds Banking Group, Essex Chambers of Commerce, Invest ESSEX, Suffolk Chambers of Commerce and Invest in Suffolk, I'd like to welcome you to this seminar. Now, the rationale for having this seminar is a discussion that we, the North Essex Energy Group, had with Jim Campbell, who is the Project Director of Sizewell C and the Deputy Managing Director of the joint venture that will be building Bradwell B, back in February, where he said that it would be really good for Suffolk and Essex companies, who EDF see as their local supply chain for companies for the two nuclear developments in Suffolk and Essex, to get involved in Hinkley Point. Because Hinkley Point is a real project, real contracts are being made, people are supplying goods and services, and we're fortunate today to have a couple of companies from both Suffolk and Essex who can give case studies about what they've done with Hinkley Point. Particularly when you think about it, we're celebrating or almost commemorating the 30th anniversary of the start of construction at Sizewell B. And last year, 61 years ago, was the 61st anniversary of construction at Bradwell. So there's a lot of expertise in Suffolk and Essex that could be used to build new nuclear, but obviously people who are around with Sizewell B and Bradwell A probably aren't around to give it now these days. We do have to name check, of course, Vivo, who are in the audience, who actually 2 acquisitions ago supplied the band screens to Bradwell B, and they're now already supplying them at Hinkley Point. So without further ado, hopefully we're doing something with the drills. Yes, we sent them off on a long tea break today. And I'd like to invite Chris Squires, the Strategic Procurement Manager at EDF, to give an overview of Hinkley Point C. Chris?
Thank you, Robert.
Thanks.
Good morning, everybody. It's like being back on site again with these drills. So my name is Chris Squires, as it says on there, Lead Supply Chain Engagement Manager for EDF Energy's Nuclear New Build Programme. So this morning I'm going to talk a little bit about EDF, quick introduction to the company for those who probably have never heard of us, but I'm sure there's not many here who've never heard of EDF. I'm going to talk a bit about Bradwell, a very little bit about Bradwell, a bit about Sizewell, and mainly about Hinkley Point C. So an update on where we are with Hinkley Point C and the challenges we face, and the opportunities that are there for companies potentially in the audience today. EDF Energy, one of the big 6 energy companies in the UK, much maligned, came into the UK through acquisition. So EDF is a French organisation, Électricité de France, French government owned largely. We came in through acquisition, initially through London Energy, but more recently through British Energy, and through that acquisition we now are the proud owners and operators of the UK nuclear fleet. So 8 nuclear power stations here in the UK, 15 reactors, but we also have other forms of energy production. So in total we produce about 20% of the UK's energy needs from our power stations. So we produce energy, we used to distribute it, we don't distribute anymore, we've sold that business, that's now UK Power Networks. And we also have our business to business and business to customers sales force. So if you look to the big 6, we're number 5 in the big 6 in terms of domestic customers, about 5.5 million domestic customers. But we're the largest supplier to industry, so that's where most of our customer base is. So we supply the likes of Network Rail, Highways England, and so on and so forth. So a large portion of our sales comes from industry. I work for Nuclear New Build. So Nuclear New Build is tasked within EDF Energy to deliver 3 new nuclear power stations. I'll come on to those in a moment. And then we have other elements of our company who operate and maintain the existing reactor fleet. The group itself, French-based but operate globally, produce about 580 odd terawatt hours of electricity, so fairly large. We're the largest in the world in terms of nuclear generation. If you go across to France, we've got 57 nuclear reactors in France. 75% of the French energy comes from nuclear power. Here it's a bit less than 20%. So we're very into renewables, of which nuclear is one, and operates as a worldwide organisation. Here in the UK, focusing on nuclear new build, we have 3 projects we're looking at. We're working with a partner called CGN. CGN, China General Nuclear, are government owned in China. They operate a whole host of reactors and are building nuclear power stations in China. We've had a long-standing relationship with them for over 30 years. We know them, we trust them, we get on well together. And they're partners in our 3 projects. So they are a minor partner in Hinkley and Sizewell. Hinkley, they have a 33.5% stake, Sizewell a 20% stake. But they are the key stakeholder at Bradwell, where they have a 66.5% stake currently. So we work closely with them, and as you see on the map, we have plans to do 3 nuclear power stations. Hinkley Point C, which is currently underway, that's Hinkley Point C. Sizewell C, a replication of Hinkley Point C, but sat next to Sizewell B. And Bradwell B down in Essex, which is a different design reactor from CGM. So if we looked at Bradwell B, where are we on that project? Well, they intend to bring over the HPR 1000 reactor, which is a Chinese-based reactor. It's currently going through the GDA process, that's the Generic Design Assessment by the UK regulator. So why are the Chinese very keen to go through this process? We have probably one of the strongest regulators in the world, you'd be pleased to know. So we're all pretty safe here. They're incredibly stringent. And if China get the GDA reactor through, if China get their reactor through the GDA process, it's kind of a gold standard. So it means they've got better chance of selling it globally. And that's their aim. It's the same reason that Hitachi are putting their reactor through the process, and why the likes of KEPCO, who are looking at sites up in Cumbria at the moment from Korea, are also keen to bring their reactor technology into the UK. So we're going through the GDA process. It's a fairly long, stretched out process. It's 4 stages, and we're into about stage 3 at the moment. So it gets more and more detailed as you go through, and the regulator will look at all aspects of the plant itself from a safety point of view to make sure that he's satisfied that it can be built in the UK without any detriment to health and safety for those living around the reactor site and for the UK as a whole. So Bradwell B, early stages, GDA process, stage 3. Sizewell C, that's our journey so far. So we started a long time ago with some community consultations, and eventually we'll get to operation, but that's some way off. We are there, so we're just about to go into stage 3 consultation for the planning process. That will commence early next year. So this is taking on the feedback we've had from the earlier consultation processes and presenting our next wad of documents which will notify businesses and the public of our intention of how we're going to go about building the nuclear power station. That is then followed by the DCO, the DCO application, so Development Consent Order, in essence the planning application. So from a timeline point of view, stage 3 consultation currently planned to be early part of next year. The DCO application submission 2020 with a decision, and commencing construction probably towards the back end of 2021. So that's when the likely timeline is for the moment for Sizewell C, and it's roughly a 10-year construction period. So it's going to be some years before the power's on the bars from from Sizewell C. So those are 2 stations over here on the east coast. And on the west coast, of course, we've got Hinkley Point C, and I'll come on to that in a moment. So what are we building? We're putting in what we call the EPR reactor. It used to be called the European Pressurised Reactor. It's now the Evolutionary Pressurised Reactor, because it's been built outside Europe as well. Hinkley Point C will be units 5 and 6. So at the moment it's under construction at Flamanville, and also in Olkiluoto in Finland, and 2 units in Taishan in China. So 5 and 6 will be Hinkley, and 7 and 8 Sizewell. It's a fairly large reactor, produces about 1.65 gigawatts per unit, and there's 2 units on each site, so that's 3.3 gigawatts of power. That's about 5% of the UK's requirements. So a pretty large reactor. If you'd replace that with land-based wind power, you'd need an area about the size of Greater Manchester to put sufficient wind generators on there to produce the same amount of power you get out of Hinkley. So that's a bit of background on the EPR, 2 of those on each site. So this is Hinkley where we currently are. So just over 2 years ago, we reached our final investment decision and we commenced construction. So what we have now is probably one of the largest construction sites in Europe. It's about £19 billion. We've got, as of today, 3,300 people working on site, so a fairly big workforce. The peak is around about 5,600. So an awful lot of workers in rural Somerset at the moment helping construct the power station. So a bit of, there we go, and that's Taishan. So proven technology. The first reactor has now been connected to the grid. So the first EPR is now up and running. Hinkley Point C itself, that's the first nuclear island. There are 2 nuclear islands. That is the heat sink. So we dig a fairly big hole, that's about 30 metres deep. Put that into context. If we drop Nelson's column into there, he'd just about be peeking over the top. So a lot of work happening at the moment. That's Kerbam's heat sink. So this is the area where the cooling water comes in for the nuclear power station to cool the condensers in the turbine house. It doesn't go anywhere near the reactors, it just cools condensers in the turbine house. And we have on here one of 3 tunnel boring machines that we've purchased, sat in Germany at the moment. The first one's about to come over to the UK, because we construct 3 fairly large tunnels for the cooling water. That's a 7-metre tunnel boring machine, about the same size as the tunnel boring machines on Crossrail, and we're constructing 3 tunnels, 2 3.5 kilometres long, one a bit shorter, and that's where the cooling water will come in from, in this case, the Severn estuary, and where the water will go back out again about 5 degrees warmer once it's gone through the power station. So I've got a movie towards the end which will show a bit more information about where we are currently in terms of the construction itself. We set ourselves a number of goals as we go down the project. We're on schedule at the moment. These are the goals we had for this year. So in Q1 was to start the construction of the pre-stressing gallery. I'll come on to that in a moment, what that does. Q2, our goal was the construction work start on the pumping station. That's what sits in that great big hole you saw, so that's underway now. Goal number 3 was the design handover for the nuclear island, so our contractor there can get on and start constructing the raft for the nuclear island. And our final goal, which is for Q4, is the Common Raft first J0. So J0 is our first nuclear concrete, so to speak. The first concrete pour on the nuclear island for Unit 1, and that's due to happen later this month, so later this November. So we're hitting those targets at the moment, and we're on track to hit Q4 target as well, so all good news currently. The pre-stressing gallery, it's basically a fairly large gallery that goes around the outside. Over the reactor sits a great big dome, pretty strong dome, very heavily reinforced concrete with lots of pre-stressing strands in it. It's designed to withstand an impact of an aircraft flying into it without any damage. But as the temperature changes within the dome and outside, it's necessary to occasionally go around and assess the pre-stressing strand cables, etc., and retention or loosen or otherwise. So this is the pre-stressing gallery that sits around the outside. You can see all the rebar cages and concrete going on. This is the raft in the middle. Over the top of that eventually will be great big massive concrete. This is a picture of the site. You'll see it far better on the video. It's a large site, it's about 2 kilometres by 1 kilometre, so a pretty large area of ground. But then again, with that many people, it needs to be. So goal number 2 was the pump house. Again, that's a better shot of the actual where the pump house sits. So 30-metre hole in the rock. You could pop a jumbo jet in there if you chose. Plenty of room for it. And here's some of the construction early work starting in the bottom of the hole. So this will be the largest concrete structure on the site, the pump house. This handles the water that comes in to cool the turbines within the conventional island that generates electricity. There's some fairly big pumps on there. Put those pumps into context. You could empty an Olympic-sized swimming pool with one of those pumps in around about just under 5 minutes. So it shifts an awful lot of water very quickly. Okay, so to construct our power station, we don't do anything ourselves, EDF, we're the clients. We have an engineering team, we do the design. The actual donkey work on site is done by a fairly complex supply chain. So we have in the order of 140 key tier 1 packages that we let. Some of these are site services, so the construction works that happen on site itself. Some of these are equipment items. And this is a snapshot of our current supply chain. So we've let around about, by value, 93% of the project value. So a lot of the tier 1 packages, we now know who the contractor is or who the supplier is. So if you look around the inner ring there, you'll see some of the names involved in the project. You've got Bylaw, which is a joint venture of Bouygues and Lango Rourke. They're the main civils contractor. They have a contract worth in excess of £3 billion for all the concrete work you see around the site. There's a number of other organisations on there. Some of these are pump suppliers. You've got Balfour Beatty doing the marine works, Cavendish, Bockard, etc. I'll come on to some of those in a moment. So a lot of fairly familiar names, and all these people here are the Tier 1 contractors. Why do I mention the Tier 1 contractors? Well, people in the room here today generally don't work for the large organisations that carry out work on site. Avivo one exception. You'll see their logo on the chart there, just about there. But most of the opportunities that exist are working for these Tier 1 contractors. So, you know, many of you aren't in a position to undertake a £3 billion contract, but you may be in a position to work for the contractor who's doing that activity. So I'll come on to how we make those connections in a moment. But that's a picture of our current supply chain. We then have a thing called MEH. So if you strip away all the concrete from the outside of our power station, that's what it looks like. It's a huge array of pipes and wires and everything else. So there are thousands of kilometres of cabling, hundreds of kilometres of pipework that need to be installed. And what we have is a big mess called MEH, mechanical, electrical and HVAC. Mechanical being all the pipework, electrical being all the cabling, and HVAC being all the air handling stuff. Traditional approach is to get a number of contractors in to do that for you. So we had identified a mechanical contractor, an electrical contractor, an HVAC contractor. What you typically find is, on the construction site, that we've got some thousands of rooms on this project, and they all have to go into the same room and do different activities. So some will go in there and put the electrical works in, some go and put pipe work in, some go and do HVAC. And in the old method of sequencing, what you tended to find was one of the contractors would get in there first, they'd do their activities, then the next one would follow, and all the stuff they'd put in would be in the way. And you're taking in and putting back out again access platforms and all the rest of it. And it's a real mess, and it slows everything down. And we've got a very complex site. So what we've tried to do here is to do a coordinated approach. So we've spent many months with an alliance looking at a coordinated approach using fairly complex 4D modelling. So taking a 3D model of the site, a bit like you see there, but in far greater detail, add the fourth dimension, which is time, and then sit down in a room with all these guys and go through the project room by room, looking at what needs to be installed and the sequence of what goes into there, and then work out the best way to do that. Who goes in there first, how we look at access, how we look at having to paint it all afterwards. So a lot of activity has been underway through this MEH alliance. So we've got this MEH joint venture, which has a number of key partners across the top. We've got an organisation called Doosan Babcock, as they're better known, based in Glasgow, in Renfrew. They're involved in the BOP, balance of plant, HVAC, mechanical. Cavendish Nuclear, part of Babcock International, are doing most of the balance of nuclear island mechanical. A joint venture of Balfour Beatty and NG Bailey, Balfour Beatty Bailey as they're now called, are doing all the electrical works. And then a group called Altrad, who do scaffolding and painting and all the other bits and pieces, they're doing all the services work. And then beneath that, there's a whole host of sub-suppliers, so organisations like Billfinger, Imtech, Bockard, NG, Tunzini, Wincanton for logistics, our own organisation Advance. They're all involved in doing services to this group. So we've got a fairly large collection of organisations there whose responsibility is to do all of this mechanical, electrical and HVAC once the civils work has been undertaken and the rooms are constructed. So it's a new approach, something that's not been done before, and we believe it's probably the right way to go on a project as complex as ours. Building a project like Hinkley and similarly Sizewell isn't just about the nuclear power station itself. We've spent an awful lot of money doing what we call the associated developments, and the same will apply to Sizewell and Bradwell. So if you look at Hinkley Point C is there, that's the line where the tunnels go out, that's a temporary jetty, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But to do all that, we've got other things as well. We've got some accommodation units. So this 5,600 people workforce, some are local, some go back to their own homes, some are travelling people. So we've constructed an accommodation campus on site for 500 workers, and we have another accommodation campus in the middle of Bridgewater for another 1,000 workers. So we've now got 1,500 bed spaces up and running. That's open, full. That's opening early December. Once constructed, that'd be the second largest hotel in the UK. So to build our project, we're having to construct lots of other activities. So we've got businesses that we've formed, called Host in this case, and their job is to run those campuses for us. So this is bringing local companies together to operate a hotel, front of house services, laundry, all the stuff you get with that. We've formed that organisation to manage those two campuses. We've got a wharf called Cummich Wharf. That's going to be used for the abnormal indivisible loads, so very big bits of kit. We don't want to haul them on the roads across from the continent. That's where most of the stuff is made. So the turbines are coming from GE Alstom in France. The reactor comes from a French manufacturer as well, because we don't make that stuff in the UK, unfortunately. So it gets shipped across, it goes into Avonmouth docks, and then it gets brought down by coaster and goes into Cummich Wharf, and then gets taken across to Hinkley Point C. So we're upgrading Cummich Wharf. Hockteeth is the contractor who's doing that. We've done lots of highway schemes to improve the roads because of the sheer amount of traffic that's now going down those roads as a result of our power station. We've constructed a whole number of park and ride facilities, so the workers don't all drive down this C148 road into Hinkley Point C. They go to park and ride facilities at Junction 24 or 25 or Cannington or Willerton, and they get onto buses. And we operate a fleet now of almost 150 buses that take people to and from the site and around the site. That's also done by a local consortium. And of course catering. We've got a large workforce on site, and rather than bring in a large catering organisation, we've formed our own company called Somerset Larder. We've brought in food providers, we've brought in other catering specialists and formed this new organisation who are out there and feeding the workforce. And that's not insignificant when you look at the sheer number of people they've got to feed. So a lot of activity goes on off the site as well as on the site. There's some case studies here that's worth thinking about. So as we go from Unit 1 into Unit 2, we learn down the journey. We're learning from what we did at Flamanville, we're learning from what's been done at Taishan. But ultimately what we're trying to do is to say when we get to Sizewell, our challenge is we need to build Sizewell for 20% less money than we're currently building Hinkley. And there's inflation to consider as well. So how do we do that? Well, we think about how we can improve, taking on board the knowledge we've learned so far. So a case study we've got here, this is one of the deep digs. So what you see here is a sprayed concrete structure. So as you dig a big hole, you can either batter back the side so it doesn't fall in on you, or you can put lots of steel piles around the outside to stop it toppling in, or you do something a bit more scientific as we have done, which is basically inserting some very long soil nails, drill a great big hole, grout a big nail in there, and spray concrete on the surface, and that stabilises the excavation. So we've done a huge amount of soil nailing, and these are the rigs they're using for it. Having dug the first hole and now digging the second hole, what they're saying on there, as you'll see in the second bullet point, it's 15% quicker, because we've taken on board the knowledge we've learned so far. The spray concrete works 30% quicker. The new tool's designed to install the 7,500 ground nails, 5% increase in productivity. So all of this knowledge we're building up is being used to make it slicker on the second unit, and then when we get to do Sizewell 3 and 4, we'll be better again. So this is how we're looking at making savings. And when you move on to Sizewell, that's an impression of what Sizewell will look like. It's virtually the same as Hinkley Point C, so you'll see 2 reactor units at the back there under the domes. These are the turbine halls. This is where the water comes in the pumping stations, and then lots of buildings around the outside. All the bits that are green on the top are exactly the same as Hinkley. So there's a lot of design work you don't have to do twice. The bits on brown are slightly different. So as you get below the ground conditions change, so it won't be exactly the same. And some of these structures are slightly different from Hinkley. But broadly speaking, a fair proportion of Sizewell C is an exact replication of Hinkley. So we believe there are great opportunities to remove costs and improve schedule when it comes around to delivering Sizewell C. So procurement activity since 2018, we've signed 98 contracts worth about £10.6 billion. We've got 16 organisations at preferred bidder stage, another almost £2 billion. We've got a number of contractors working on what we call ECIs, that's early contractor involvement schemes. Those aren't yet in contract. There's some contracts we're still working on, so 35 in procurement and 63 contracts yet to launch. So there's still some opportunities out there. That's a list of the contracts yet to be procured. I don't expect you to be able to read that because it's fairly tiny for those at the back particularly. But what we do have is a website. So if you go onto the EDF Energy website and drill down, details at the bottom there, but I can share them with you afterwards, you will find on there the Hinkley Point C supply chain. And as you go down the package, that's package by package, package number and some details on it. You click on the details box, that brings up a whole load of spiel about what the package is about, who the tenderers are or who the contractor is. So you've got information there to understand what your customer base is. So the information is there, it's on the website, and it gives you details of every single package that we are letting. You can also keep in touch with us. There's my email address if you want to get in touch with me. We have a website, Twitter and Instagram. And then we're also working with Chambers of Commerce. So I've got David Birch down the front here. Put your hand up, David. So David's here from Essex Chamber. At the very back of the room, just walked in, is Miles Vartan. Miles from Suffolk Chamber of Commerce. And then over on the East Coast, they're not here today, but we're working with Somerset Chamber of Commerce. So that's our route to market for local and regional businesses. And we're very keen to work with local and regional businesses as much as we can. So at Hinkley Point, local is anybody based in Somerset, and regional is all the counties that have a boundary with Somerset, including those along the south coast of Wales and including Cornwall. And we're putting a huge amount of work currently through businesses based in those areas. When it comes to Sizewell, local is Suffolk, regional are all the companies with a boundary with Suffolk. And Essex we've yet to determine with our colleagues in CGM, but I suspect it'd be fairly similar. So where you're based, get in touch with the Chamber of Commerce. They can provide a bit more help and guidance. They have websites and details about what's going on. And those are the routes to market there. Sizewell C supply chain will take you through to the Suffolk Chamber portal. Hinkley supply chain will take you through to the Somerset Chamber portal, and that's where you register your details if you're interested in working for us. I'm conscious of time. What I do have is a very short video which gives you a bit more of an insight on what the project's doing. There we go. You see the site's changed somewhat over the last couple of years. Site has overrun. I understand we're doing Q&A later on, so I will be around all morning if you want to ask any questions. But for the moment, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Well, I think as you can see, there's quite a bit going on there. I'd now like to invite Gareth Oakley, who's the Managing Director for Business Banking at Lloyds Banking Group, to talk about the support that they can give to companies involved in the Hinkley Point supply chain.
Thank you. Good morning. So as you've heard, my name's Gareth Oakley and I'm the Managing Director for Business Banking at Lloyds Banking Group. I also have another role, which is to be the group's regional ambassador. This is a role which entails me working with businesses, politicians, the media and the LEPs right the way across this region to understand the challenges and promote the opportunities that exist in our region. Now, the socio-economic climate and current political events mean that we are facing into a high degree of uncertainty. I'm therefore delighted that we've been able to work with Invest ESSEX and Invest Suffolk to run today's event. It's also great to see so many businesses from across our region showing such an interest in the supply chain opportunities that Hinkley Point offers. As an organisation, we are committed to helping Britain prosper. Our Helping Britain Prosper plan takes us beyond business as usual, tackling the social and economic issues that matter most to the people, businesses and communities across Britain. We want to help British businesses to build, train and grow. And that's why we've committed to providing 750 million in new funding for the social housing sector, to support over 100,000 businesses start up for the first time, to help 25,000 customers export for the first time, and to increase our net lending to SMEs and mid-corporate businesses by up to £2 billion in 2018. Now, our own Business Barometer survey shows that despite this uncertainty, business confidence has actually been increasing. In fact, we have recently seen an increase in confidence in our region, as many firms across the east of England are seeing a slightly brighter outlook. It's therefore timely that we're here to discuss how we can support businesses take advantage of the supply chain opportunities in the construction of Hinkley Point. Now, we identified Hinkley as a great opportunity to support small businesses, and that is why in May we launched our £100 million fund dedicated to the infrastructure at Hinkley Point. It can be used by all types of businesses that provide any type of service, including indirect services. So this includes things such as hotels, transport, security services. And it's great to see that we have such a wide and varied collection of businesses here today. It's worth noting that the timeline for Hinkley is not too dissimilar to what has been proposed for Bradwell B and Sizewell C. And it's already estimated that over £200 million will be put into the local economy, and it will create 25,000 job opportunities. Now, Hinkley is a long-term process. There's the initial idea, followed by the commissioning, followed by the build. And it's therefore important to understand that things may not happen for 8, 9 or even 10 years. And during that time, you may face some key challenges. And if you do, our relationship teams will be on hand to support you through the whole process. We will help you take advantage of the opportunity, show you how to position your business and how to go about securing contracts. It's therefore important to understand the opportunity that Hinkley presents for your business. And it's really important to engage with the supply chain and to maintain up-to-date and relevant skills on the portal. Because work packages are loaded onto the portal, so this engagement will allow you to spot opportunities as they become available. Now, it's possible that your original idea may come to fruition earlier than you originally expected. It might need to be slightly different to what you had originally planned. Or you may need to allow for a completely different area of focus. To work your way through all of this, we recommend networking, building your contacts, keeping your information updated on the supplier portal, and understanding which supply chain your business is interested in. Making relationships with the supply chain and understanding the flow of opportunities will be critical to who wins contracts. Simply registering your details on the portal will not be sufficient. Now, you should consider the impact a contract like this can have on your business. Securing a contract at Hinkley could be significant, and it's important that you consider what impacts it could have on you. You might see an increase in labour costs because you require specific skills to deliver that contract. Have you got the right team around you? Are you getting the right legal advice? Do you need to consider HR support or consider additional financial reporting via your accountants? So planning ahead on these types of things will help you be in the best position possible for the way forward. It's also worth looking at opportunities in new and unique ways. Perhaps a competitor that offers complementary skills could work effectively with you in a joint venture. This could be a great way to secure a contract if you don't have the skills or the resources to do so. Now, we've seen this work really well already, with many SMEs collaborating successfully to succeed together. And at Lloyds, we've had to change the way that we look at things as well. And we've invested an awful lot of time to learn how these large infrastructure projects work. And we think it's important that you have a finance partner that understands what it is that you are trying to achieve and the type of structure that suits you best. Now, we've worked with the Scale Up Institute to highlight the challenges that businesses face in terms of people, leadership, contacts, and access to finance. And in turn, we use this learning to engage with EDF, the supply chain, and professionals to best understand how we can support you. So we're delighted to be able to support businesses that want to supply Hinkley, and our fund is there to help businesses just like yours. And this is why our relationship model can really add value to your business. So I thought at this point I would bring to life a couple of real examples. So firstly, we're currently in a conversation with a firm in Somerset who approached us for some advice on Hinkley. They provide consultation on painting offshore oil rigs and see Hinkley as a natural next step in growing their business. Now, if they're successful in securing a contract, they will see a 10-fold increase in their turnover. So we're providing insight and guidance on the process and exploring how we can support them further. We've also supported Astron Fire and Security. This is a family-run business in Bristol. Now, they secured a £90,000 loan from our fund, which will allow them to cover the wages of a new on-site engineer, a new van to transport equipment, and £20,000 worth of laptops for their engineers. This operation is set to boost their annual turnover by 25%. So I hope that's given you some insight in terms of how we can support you as part of the Hinkley Point development and the impact that this could have on your business. We have Steve Elsom, who's the Regional Director for SME at Lloyds Banking Group here as well, and we have Liz Barber, one of our area directors. Now, they'll be happy to talk to you in more detail about the fund and answer any questions that you might have. So in the meantime, thank you again for joining us today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the event.
Thanks for that, Gareth. Unfortunately, as he mentioned, he's got to move off to London now for an appointment, but we're grateful to him and for Lloyds Banking Group for their sponsorship. I'd now like to introduce the first of our two case studies from companies who have experience already of supplying Hinkley Point. Mr Matt Moss, from who's the Finance Director of Poundfield Products of Stone Market.
Thank you. You can do.
We'll go around. Oh, you know what you're doing. Right, okay, thanks. Which helps.
So the first challenge of any presentation is to make sure technology works, because it's all downhill if it doesn't from there on. As Robert says, my name's Matt Moss. I'm the Finance Director for a company called Poundfield Products, and I'm here today to talk to you about our supply of concrete to Hinkley Point. Now, I know what you're probably all thinking. An accountant talking about concrete, yes, that is a bit of a conversation killer. So I will try and make it as interesting as I possibly can for you and not talk about tax. So, Poundfield Products, who are we, what are we? We're a precast concrete manufacturer founded in 1999. We're based off a single site in Ipswich, just near Ipswich, a 9-acre site. We employ 75 staff, and up until 2018, like most of you, we were an owner-managed business. The interesting thing is, we are, if you can see it at the back, 250 miles away from Hinkley Point. And if you know anything about concrete, it doesn't travel particularly well. It's quite expensive to move. So what do we actually do? On the tender document, I wrote, we manufacture engineered concrete solutions, use the structural elements in projects nationwide, from one-off builds to large-scale infrastructure projects, which sounds pretty good. And you can see just here, this is Hinkley Point, and this is some of our units on the site here. Who do we work with? Well, from an infrastructure point of view, we've worked on many projects across the UK, sea defence projects, railway, bridges, from the north all the way down through to the south. So we've got quite a large spectrum of clients and projects that we've dealt with. Our business also provides other concrete solutions from agriculture through to waste, and we also have a housing element as well. So quite a breadth. But what did we actually do for Hinkley Point is what you really want to know. So we supplied 150 retaining wall units extending 200 metres long down on the site at Hinkley, and you can see just circled down here, the first load of our units coming in here. It was via two contracts, the Kia BAM joint venture and also the Bylaw joint venture, each worth over £100,000 each. And the main purpose for that was for material storage. So we are usually some of the first people on site. The construction of a site like this takes an awful lot of construction material, and our units are used to store them on site. So specifically, what were we asked to do? So we had to provide concrete solutions capable of storing construction materials. They had to deal with the force of the load that was being used, quite a significant load with the amount of materials being used, and it had to provide a flexibility so that it could be temporarily moved as the site developed. And we had to provide a proven solution. Now, our proven solution was a product called the Alpha Block. So what was the product and what was the proof that we were able to deliver on this project? Well, what we were able to do is provide them with the evidence that the product was structurally designed, it had the supporting calculations to do the job. We manufactured to British standards, we were able to provide the evidence for that. And the product itself is CE accredited, which means that it's produced to a quality standard that they were able to accept. We were able to produce all the supporting documentation for it and provide evidence that it was controlled or produced under factory control procedures. We also have in-house testing of our products, and we were able to provide them with the strength of our products both the next day, 7 days, 28 days after. And if you know anything about concrete, it's the 28th day that is the important. The fundamental point here is that we did not actually change our business to be fit for nuclear. Our processes were already in place, and it was surprising to us how ready we already were, and the fear factor of not being ready for nuclear didn't actually exist. I'm not saying that will be the case for everybody, but that was the case for us. So what did we do? How did we get involved? One of the benefits of the supply chain, if you sign up to it, is that you get updates from the Tier 1 awards. So we knew that Bylaw had been awarded the contract the joint venture contract at Hinkley Point, which means that we could be positively engaging with that joint venture to give us multiple points of attack through the supply chain, through the chambers, direct to the joint venture itself. But we had to understand our offer. We had to know where we sat in the process and what we were able to offer the contract, and that was really important. Were we a direct supplier? Were we an indirect supplier? Could we provide it on our own, or did we have to use third parties? But the important thing about it was that we didn't assume that our competitors would be there. We'd never assumed that we would be going into a bit of a dogfight in terms of the contract. So, preparing to be fit for nuclear. As I said, actually, we found that they were very similar to other major contracts and major tenders that we'd already worked on. But you want to try and make it as easy as you possibly can for the supply chain. So make sure, as I've said previously, about your offer. Make sure you know what you're providing. Looking the part, making sure your website, your literature, the performance of your product and the information that sits behind that is relevant and up to date. Accreditations are useful. We're not ISO accredited. We have our CE accreditation. They are useful in the process, but actually the important thing is that you can demonstrate your competence. That's really essential in terms of delivering on these projects. Vetting your own supply chain, working with others, as mentioned previously. We use a third-party contract haulier to deliver all of our products, so it was important for us to ensure that our third-party supply, when our products turned up on site, that the haulier would actually comply and follow the health and safety procedures on a site like Hinkley, which I'm sure you can imagine are very high. Without doubt, you're going to have to dedicate some time to this and engage very, very early, because if you don't, you could well miss out. And as I've said here, you want to become a radioactive man or woman to be successful in being fit for nuclear. But like most of you, we sat and thought, how do we get past that first hurdle? How do we prepare for the unknown? The fit for nuclear buzzword, so to speak, when you don't know what you don't know. How do you know whether being fit for nuclear, whether you are actually ready for it? Are your accreditations up to standard? You know, how competent are you in being able to deliver that? How will your business cope with the demand of such a large-scale project? And like many of you, that can be off-putting because you don't know what you're going forward to. But like us, we seized the opportunity, and I suggest that you would do as well. But I was asked when preparing, when I was asked to do the presentation, what help did we get? What help did we have? We secured the first contract 4 years ago. So what help did we have 4 years ago to do it? Well, not very much, to be honest with you. There's not as much information back then as there is now.